As Kansas is looking to still add three more possible players via internationally, the transfer portal, high school reclass, wherever it is, who are even still available in the transfer portal? Where could Kansas go as they maybe continue to scour who's available in this long extending offseason?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day, and thank you to everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. You can find us on our YouTube page, where you can like and subscribe to the show, or anywhere that you get your audio side of things from the podcast standpoint. We're going to be breaking down top players available for Kansas basketball, still in the transfer portal from each position: guards, wings, bigs. They're continuing to maybe look overseas as well, but who is still out there in the transfer portal as we get closer and closer to the start of the school year, and really this stuff starting to wrap up. This episode of the show is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase with GameTime. Okay, so we're going to get started with some of the guards that are still available in the portal. Then we'll get to more of our wings and our big men. And then we're going to finish up a little bit on today's show, talking a bit about the KU Athletics, their revenue share split, because there's some interesting quotes given from a story with Shreyas Latta in the Kansas City Star. I will say before we get into this too, this isn't just going to be the only avenue for KU. Obviously, they can look for high school reclasses, though, maybe those are fewer and far between. International prospects continues to be an interesting one, and certainly it'll be interested to see, especially for the bigs and wings at the international level, is probably where you're trying to look for those, but also some of the questions about, are you going to be able to get players eligible and going through that process? Those are still things that you're going to have to worry about with anybody that you try to bring in overseas. And so I still would set, if you're filling out the roster, I would imagine there's going to at least be one international edition, because it just makes the most sense with the biggest player pool. But being able to get somebody from the transfer portal would make a lot of sense. Now, maybe if they're not wanting to go into a guy like Bryce Dessert, if you're not wanting to try to get him eligible, maybe that is indicative to us that they don't even want to worry about getting somebody who might have to go through an NCAA process of getting eligible, in terms of, do they still have a year left to play? Do they still have eligibility? Or maybe that's part of the waiting game here, why they still do have all these open scholarships, that they are kind of waiting on some of these appeals to come with the NCAA and come through and see who gets approved, who gets denied, and that will steer them in a certain direction. And that brings us to our first guy who's still available in the transfer portal from the point guard, combo guard, shooting guard. One of those categories would be John Buggs III. I've done a deep dive on John Buggs III. Thank you, everydayers, if you already caught that one. He's a fan favorite of mine because he is, for my money, certainly right now, I feel comfortable saying he's the best three-point shooter available in the portal. I guess you could argue Monsanto, but that's another thing. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the country, is one of the ways of putting it. He shot 41% from three this year, 45% the year before that. For his collegiate career, 91 games played, 5.6 three-point attempts per game at 41%. This dude is a knockdown shooter. He shoots them from everywhere. He shoots them from really deep. Elite shooting guard. He's 6'3". He comes from East Tennessee State. Now, the question, though, I think is there with him, defense would be one of them, but that's not why you'd be bringing him in. Is he eligible? Because you go back to his freshman season, it was in the 2019-20 season with UMass, but he only played 4 games, and then he had an injury. He was out for the year, so he took a medical redshirt. So theoretically, he should be a redshirt freshman coming into the 20-21 season. Did not play in the 20-21 season. I don't know if that was because of the injury or what. So I don't know how that counts with the NCAA clock, but it shouldn't count because that was the COVID year, so it wouldn't have counted if he played anyway. Then he goes to Hill College, which is the junior college, which, again, we're saying the junior college thing doesn't count. So then he goes to UTSA for 2022-23, North Texas the year after that, and East Tennessee State the year before that. But again, if we're not counting the JUCO year because of that ruling, if we're not counting the COVID year when he didn't play anyway, if we're not counting his UMass year when he only played 4 games and had a medical redshirt, then that means the only 3 years that should count are the UTSA, North Texas, East Tennessee State, and that would mean he has 1 year left to play. Now, maybe it's not that simple with the NCAA, but to me, feels like he should be, and he would be somebody that I would love for Kansas to add as an elite, lethal three-point shooter to the bench of the roster. Jarvis Moss, another guy that we've done a deep dive on. Again, thank you to Everydayers if you already caught him, and you can just search Locked On Jayhawks, Jarvis Moss, if you want to go see more, on him, or same with John Buggs or whatever, right? But Moss started his career at Stanford, didn't play much, went to Davidson again, not really a big part of the rotation. Then he goes to Radford this year and has his breakout year. Was that just because he transferred down? Was it because he happened to, if he would have still been at Davidson, he would have had a breakout year anyway. But 13.5 points per game, again, good three-point shooter, almost 38% on 6.5 attempts per game. A little more 3-and-D than Buggs. I don't know that I would call Moss like an elite defender, but I think a little bit more of the 3-and-D. But Moss, not quite as good of a shooter as Buggs potentially. So those are ones that maybe you could bring in as guys that, would make sense in kind of fitting into that Jalen Coleman-Lands, Diggy Coit role. Now, maybe we just had an episode on Cam McDowell, the transfer from Division II. Check that out if you haven't already. That was our Monday episode. And we talked a little bit about him, and he would kind of fit into that role too. So these are just more options if that ends up, falling through, or he picks another school, or Kansas goes in another direction, whatever it ends up being. These would be other options. Another guy would be Darren Boyd. He is a 6'3", 210-pound guard from most recently College of Charleston. And he put up almost 14 points per game for College of Charleston, if I can speak, my goodness, this past season. He really good three-point shooter, 38.5% on 6.2 attempts per game. Year before that, or the 2 years before that, he was with Lipscomb in the Atlantic Sun, and he put up double-digit points per game, including 17.6 points per game his final year at Lipscomb. Overall, because I think he started his career at the junior college, or maybe it came at a lower level, because he only has 3 years of D1 play. So I'm assuming that's why he could have another year. But again, somebody who it's like maybe KU is waiting to see if he gets eligible or not. But the thing with Boyd, you're talking 4.5 3-point attempts per game over 86 D1 collegiate games at 40.1% from three. So again, this is somebody who would come in, fit a specific role, shooter, off the bench. He would make a little bit of sense to me. Next guy is Tanaj Petway. And this might be one that's I don't know. He was all SWAC, but like the SWAC is seen as one of the worst conferences in D1 college basketball. So he started his career at Stony Brook for a couple of years. Then he goes to New Mexico State, which is up a level a little more, but only 14 minutes per game. So he goes back down, goes to Prairie View A&M, where he shoots 44% from the floor, 33% from three on 5.2 attempts per game. He's at 3.4 attempts per game for his collegiate career, 31% from three. Not as much of a knockdown shooter, is coming off a 17-point per game season, but again, lower league. This would be more one for me with Petway that you're just trying to fill out the roster. I don't know that I would classify him in the same way as like a Moss or a Buggs, where I'm like, okay, that guy could come in and be your 8th or 9th man, that Diggy Coit, Jalen Coleman-Lands role. Petway to me would be more in the I don't know, competition with like Shelby and, I guess like Corbin Allen, like for the back end of the roster of guys just looking to strengthen your depth and give you stuff in practice. So those would be the ones there. As far as the 2-3 wings, if we're looking to more that position, again, if you wanted to include McDowell into this conversation, which I think he deserves to be in this conversation, because clearly KU has some level of interest in bringing him on for a visit, and I think he's a pretty good player. I would probably view him, like if I was ranking out these players, which one I would most want, the ones I mentioned, I'd probably go Buggs 1, McDowell 2, Moss, either Moss or Boyd, maybe Boyd 3, Moss 4, and then Petway 5. And then if we added the 2-3 wing into the conversation, Ali Dibba, he is like a 6'5". You can play him at the shooting guard. You can play him at the 3. I've mentioned him a couple times. Started his career at Chicago State, goes to Abilene Christian for 2 years, Southern Illinois for 1. And again, maybe the conversation here is just him trying to get eligible. But that first year with Chicago State, he did start 2 games, 26 minutes per game, but only 5 games played. So I don't know if he had a season-ending injury or what. Maybe he just has to wait for that to get medically redshirt cleared or whatever it is. But 34% from 3 this past year, 35 the year before. Now, he's a little lower volume of a 3-point shooter. That's the question here. But he's solid rebounder, about 5 rebounds per game this year, 4.5 the year before, 1.5 steals per game this year, almost 1.5 the year before that, and really good field goal percentages overall. 49 this year. For his career, he's at 48% from the field. So just an overall kind of scorer that you could maybe have as a bench wing, somebody coming off, and maybe he wants a bigger role than that. Maybe that's part of why he's still in the portal too. But those are some guards that I don't know that I would say I'm like keeping an eye on, because at this point, Kansas has already passed over them once. But if you are kind of circling back on certain guys, those are some names that I think would make a little bit of sense for KU, at least to some extent, on what role they're playing. Let's continue on with what wings and bigs are available still in the portal. This is Locked On Jayhawks. This episode of the show is brought to you by GameTime. Great place to get your tickets. I know the Kansas City Royals are on the struggle bus right now, but maybe the difference is you showing up to a game and getting a hot dog and enjoying the game. And maybe those positive vibes that you bring will be the difference in them winning the game. Plus, they're going to be hosting the Dodgers coming up this weekend. And on Saturday, it's bring out the blue t-shirt. So that's fun. 3:10, probably going to be hot, but that's perfect baseball weather, right? You get to see a bunch of stars from the Dodgers. You get to see if Kansas City can pull off a win, get off this losing streak. And tickets ain't so bad when you go on GameTime, right? You can toggle the include fees, so you're not surprised to check out. I've got it up for 2 tickets right now. Maybe you want to do more, though. Maybe you want to, bring the whole family, something like that. But I'm looking right now, and this is just a quick search. Let's see. Field Box 143 Road G, which is pretty darn good seats, $102, and you'll be out there in right field, and Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, like all these guys coming to town. Plenty of other tickets. You can get in as low standing room only for like under $30 there. And with Game Time Guarantee, you're getting the best deal. If you find a price in the same row and section, they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, talking some of the players still available in the transfer portal. So we got through some of the guards. What about some of the players on the wing? And again, if you wanted to include Dibba as a wing or McDowell as a wing, because technically 2 3s can be counted as wings, that's fine. I just counted them as guards, just to split this up. So if you're looking at more wings of like the 3-4 style, guys that you could play at the 4, Keontae Jones would be the first one here. And so Jones began his career not at the D1 level as well. He went to Mineral Area Community College and was there for 2 seasons. And then he goes to Midland College, which was another junior college for 1 season. Now, one of those seasons at Mineral Area was the COVID year. So now he's coming in to CSUN as a junior, Cal State University Northridge, and then comes there for this last year, which was technically a senior year. But if he's not going to have one of the JUCO years count, then boom, he has an extra year of play, right? He put up really good numbers for Cal State Northridge, playing alongside Marcus Adams, former KU commit. He went for 13 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, 4 assists per game, almost 2 steals, over a block per game. Stat sheet stuffer, and did it efficiently. Almost 51% from the floor. Not a big 3-point shooter, but when he shoots them, they tend to go in. Only 1.1 3-point attempts per game over his 2 seasons with Cal State Northridge. That's a total of 76 3-pointers, so not a ton. But he made them at almost a 36% clip, including 38% this year. But again, this past year, only 13 of 34. It's not a lot of made threes. But if this guy's a bench wing coming off, who can just give you more depth at the 3 and 4. You don't need him chucking up threes. And, you do have 3 scholarships left. You could bring on a bench wing. You could bring on a bench guard who's a shooter, and then your bench big man, right? So you can still make that work in a lot of ways. The big question would be the shooting. But just in terms of a really good basketball player like Jones still being available, I find it interesting. Now, he was committed. I think it was USC. I can't remember totally. But he decommitted. So that has kind of led him being back in the portal. Another name that again, I feel weird saying keeping an eye on, because I don't think there's been any like connected dots with KU, but just that I find interesting if we are going to scour the portal again, just to try to unearth any type of names we can. And to be clear, I don't know that there's any like players right now in the portal that KU could bring in and you'd be like, yeah, they could compete for a starting role, especially knowing that we already like they're going to miss summer ball at this point in time. I don't think that exists, but can you get role players still in the portal? Yes, I do think they can find that. And Jameer Simpson is one of those guys. So he was at Southern Utah this past season. And before that, he had spent the entirety of his career at the non-Division One level. But he performed well in his first year at the Division One level. Goes to Southern Utah. He shoots 34% from three, so solid three-point shooter. He's a 6'5" wing, 16.1 points per game, 4.7 rebounds per game. And he would just be somebody that he was all whack this past season. Like, again, just be kind of a specific role, come in off the bench, like do what you do. He was at Wisconsin Parkside before that. He also took a redshirt year in the 2023 to 2024 season. So I don't know, maybe there's an eligibility thing where they just have to get that approved as well on that end of things. You know what? I'm going to rep my guy, Noah Rigatuso. As we're talking like D2 guys who transferred up. I don't know. I got to call a lot of Baker games. Noah Rigatuso is a Division I athlete. Kansas wants somebody who can come in and just compete and, give them depth and stuff. You're just trying to fill out the roster. I don't know. You could do worse than that. Let's see. 4-5 men. Tafara Gapari. I don't know if that's the proper pronunciation. It's a fun name to say. He's a 6'9", 205-pound forward from Wellington, New Zealand. And he began his career at UMass, played 30 games, 12 minutes per game. Goes to Georgia Tech for a year where he starts in 15 games. That's a weird thing. He goes from UMass where he's playing 12 minutes per game, transfers up to Georgia Tech, and all of a sudden he's a part-time starter playing more minutes per game, which, the field goal percentage, not good, 35% as a starting forward. He obviously likes to play a lot like a three, and I don't know how well that would mesh with Bill Self, but he can shoot three. He finally had his best year this year for Maryland, though. As a junior at Maryland, 32 games played, 10.3 minutes per game. So, like, could this guy come in and just give you depth as like a bench big who can play the 3 or 4? 47% from the field, 37% from three. Again, this is a lower volume because he's playing bench minutes, but you could do worse in terms of just finding, if you're just trying to find a body to lengthen your depth. If something happens, then maybe that one makes a little bit of sense there. And then if you're looking for a true center, it feels like KU is really focusing on the international market to try to get a center here, but there still is one stateside, Tariq Ingraham. He's a 6'9", 255-pound forward who began his career at Wake Forest, was 2 years there. Then he goes to Rider for 3 years. Now, again, maybe the holdup here is he going to get eligible or not? I would think he should because, okay, you go to his first year at Wake Forest. That's the 20 to 21 season in which he plays 2 games. That's the COVID year, so it shouldn't count. And then his second year at Wake Forest, he only plays 1 game. So he could just have a red shirt there, right? So then you're talking about being a basically third-year freshman where he spends 3 years at Rider. He should be like a sixth-year senior if you're going by all that stuff this upcoming season. But at Rider this past season, 11 points per game, 7 rebounds per game. He's got good touch around the basket, good back to the basket score, would give Kansas a little bit of post-up scoring off the bench, and it would give them that strength, whereas Flory's more the athlete, the long center. It would give them a center who has a little bit more girth to him in Ingraham. And I kind of like his game. But again, some of these players, maybe you're just waiting to see, are they going to be eligible or not? Some of them maybe you weren't going to be that interested in, but now that things are drying up, maybe you circle back to. I don't know what the answer will be here for KU. How much money do they have to do it? That's an interesting question. Let's talk about how KU might be using their rev share, how they might split this up with some of the different sports, because some interesting stuff from Travis Goff and Shreyas Latta with the Kansas City Star. We'll discuss that next. Thanks for joining us again on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Again, you can make our show your first listen every day, and thank you to everydayers who already do. Don't forget, you can check out Locked On College Football or Locked On College Basketball as well. Okay, so Travis Goff gave him some interesting quotes talking about the rev share, which has been passed now in the NCAA House settlement, basically allowing for the schools to pay the players themselves. And basically, you have $20.5 million. The schools have to decide how they want to divvy that out. Now, that said, just because you have a max of giving that money, that doesn't mean that every school, and doesn't mean that Kansas will be one of those schools. And in fact, there had been some interesting quotes and lead up to this before it actually got passed by guys like Doug Gerard, the chancellor for KU. I think it was mostly him. I can't remember if Travis Goff actually said anything on it, but it was mostly Gerard kind of saying like, yeah, we don't know if we're going to use that full thing. So this was, I think, good news for Kansas that this was said. This is in the article. It's from Shreyas Latta, Kansas City Star. Go check it out, kansascity.com. And it says in the story, University of Kansas staff members and athletic director Travis Goff say they've spent approximately 15 months planning for revenue share to take effect. According to Goff, the current plan is to spend the entire allocated $20.5 million annual budget. So that is very good news. And it goes in later kind of talking about like it almost, the way it's kind of phrased doesn't necessarily, they're leaving themselves like a little bit of a cushion, if that makes sense. Like it's almost like they're planning to, and he didn't say a specific number, but like just to give an example here, that they're planning to use say 17, 18, 19 million of the rev share and going to leave themselves a little cushion that they can go to the full 20 and a half. But I'd imagine they're only going to get there if it gets them the right player, where it's like they're not just going to use it just to use it, if that makes sense. And that is a good way of thinking about it, right? Because theoretically, if you don't use, let's say you save 500,000 one year to doing it, theoretically, does that give you more money to work with the following season if you have to spend more money somewhere else and you're like, man, I don't know if we can get to the 20 and a half this year. And then you're like, okay, but we have that extra million from the year before that we didn't use. And now we can get back to the full 20 and a half this year. So it'll be interesting to see how they work that. But that is good news that they're planning on, using the full thing, because that tells you they've figured it out and are in a good area from that perspective to try to be as competitive as possible with these other schools. Here's the other key quote, though, from the article. And again, check out the whole thing, and there's a lot of good info in there. But it says, from Travis Goff, I'm pretty confident we're going to be in the top 10 percentile of men's basketball allocation out of the gate. I think the number could be in the $4.5 to $5.5 million range if you're at the top. So a couple things, because this is kind of interesting in how you read this quote. The second part there, I think the number could be in the $4.5 to $5.5 million range if you're at the top. Is that saying that we're not quite at the top, but those are what the top numbers are expected to be? And then where exactly would Kansas be for that? The other part of this is the syntax here. Saying in the top 10 percentile of men's basketball sounds really good. It's like, oh, we're in the top 10 percentile. When you actually think about the syntax there, it's not the top 10. It's the top 10 percentile. And the top 10 percentile means you're in the top 10% of college basketball. There are 364 teams in Division I college basketball. That means you would only be really in the top 36, 37, which if I told you that Kansas basketball, right, everybody wants them to have more money and yada, yada in the offseason stuff. If I was like, yeah, they're actually 34th in what they're spending on their roster, I think that would kind of make a lot of people mad. So I understand why Travis Goff framed it that way. And I'm not saying this right now to be like, oh, they're not spending enough money. I understand why he framed it that way. And I actually do think, to defend Travis Goff here, I think this is the right play. This is what I have been saying all along. You should not do this as your Kansas basketball has so much interest. Kansas basketball has so much donor support that if you are picking between giving more money to football, a set base salary essentially to football, versus where you would give less money to basketball and have to raise more money with NIL, versus having to, have the highest paid rev share roster in basketball and having to raise that same amount of money in NIL for football. Like, what do you think is going to be easier to raise, say, $5 million in NIL for? Basketball or football? It's going to be basketball. So it does make sense that you're going to put together a number that is going to be still competitive, right? Top 10 percentile in college basketball. Maybe it's 3 or 4 million, right? Maybe it's somewhere in that range where it's still not that far off from what the top rosters are spending. And you're just going, no, we know we're going to be competitive with NIL and be able to get that stuff, that we'll make that work. And now we have a set number that we can use for Olympic sports that can make them, the best on the block. We have a set number that we can use for football to make sure they're as competitive as they need to be and as competitive as possible, especially in a world where there's conference realignment and you want to have that figured out. I think it's a very smart play, actually, by Travis Goff to kind of work it that way. The big question is, how do you, Travis Goff almost has to be therapist, marriage counselor type of thing here now with all these coaches to be like, this is why you're getting this, and this explains this. And do you just end up with a room full of unhappy coaches where, this coach is like, man, I can't believe that coach is getting this. I should be getting half that money or something like that, right? You almost have to find the right coaches that are not going to think that way. Like, does Bill Self view it the same way that I'm viewing it? Where like, yeah, I think that's smart because they'll be able to make the NIL money and stuff like that. Does Bill Self view it in a different way where he's kind of mad about it, right? I'm not saying that's the case. Or like, does Lance Leipold be like, yeah, I'm even mad that you're getting that much. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying that those are the cases. I'm just saying like, you do have to play like, not anger management, because I don't think it's like angry, but like, again, like marriage counselor if you are Travis Goff here. So I did find that very interesting. And it seems like Kansas is in a good place. The fact that they are going to be, planning that they can spend all of that 20 and a half. And maybe that's part of it too. Like the idea of that there's the cushion. Well, they would have used some of that cushion if Darian Williams was coming aboard. But now that, maybe they might be looking in other directions to try to fill out the roster, maybe they don't need to fill out that cushion. And maybe that's part of, figuring this whole thing out if you're Kansas and Bill Self and Lance Leipold and on down the Kansas athletic department. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We'll see you later this week for some more player deep dives, getting you ready for possible targets for KU basketball. This has been Locked On Jayhawks.